Hello and welcome to another episode of the Maxi-Geek Show. Today is Friday, March 17th, and this is episode number 53. It was a much quieter week this week, but there was still some good news to be had. A few games got release dates, some games got big updates, and there was a big delay. This week we're going to end the show by talking in depth about our hands-on with Dead Island 2, but first we're going to talk about the expanding Galaxy, the lineup from Samsung, that is. So the other day, Samsung announced the expanding Galaxy A line. So the Galaxy A line is what they call their trying to think of the word of it, their value line. So this is what they offer to consumers who maybe don't want to spend $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 on a phone. There are 4 phones in the lineup. They only really highlighted 2 in the information they sent us, so that's all we sort of highlighted. But there are 2. So there's the Samsung Galaxy A54, which is available in they call it Awesome Violet, I just call it Violet, and then Awesome Graphite or Black. And then there's the A34, which is available in Awesome Graphite or Awesome Lime, i.e. black and yellow, black and green. The phones are pretty much the same, from a very early look at them. I mean, by that I mean if you glance at them, they look almost identical. The big difference is in terms of like camera specs. The A54 has a better camera on the front than the A34, but they both sport 5,000 milliamp hour batteries, which will give you about 2 days worth of use depending on how you use them. They're both 5G enabled. They both have a 6.6 inch 120 hertz screen, so you'll be able to game on it fairly well. All the phones in the range come with 128 gigabytes of storage. Now the reason why I wanted to highlight it is not because it's more Samsung phones, it's because of the price point. So the base model of the phones are the A14. That sounds right. And then there's the A14 5G, the A34, and the A35. Sorry, A54, sorry. So the A14, the cheapest of them, starts at $329. So for $329, you can get a 6.6 inch phone with 128 gigabytes of storage, and it'll come in black. For an extra $50 more, you can get the 5G model. So that's really why I wanted to highlight these, is because they do offer, value, right? I know a number of people that have children, and they're always, I don't want to get my kids a phone because they're so expensive. This is clearly a better alternative, than buying the $800 iPhone, especially with how some kids are with, phones. By the same logic too, if you're, someone who maybe you don't care about gaming on your phone, you don't care about Facebook or Twitter or whatever it is on the phone, you just need it for a phone, to be contactable while you're out and about, $330, $380 for a phone is probably going to be fantastic value. Now, of course, these aren't available just yet. They are coming on the 31st of March here in Australia, so another 2 weeks or so before they're available. Don't think we're going to be reviewing these. It is possible they may offer one for review, but we'll have to wait and see on that one. But yeah, I just wanted to call it out because, for their starting price, they are phenomenal value. Moving away from the world of phones, we're going to move into the world of video games and talk about Disney Speedstorm, which finally got a release date. Sort of. So Disney Speedstorm was supposed to release in September last year, having been announced quite a while ago via a Nintendo Direct. Gameloft today announced that it is coming out on April 18th, sorry, my apologies. April 18th. But it's doing that same thing that Gameloft did with the Disney Dreamlight Valley, and it's launching into early access on all platforms. Now, traditionally, when a game enters early access on Steam, it is flagged as an early access title. When a game enters early access on Xbox, it's bucketed as game preview. PlayStation and Nintendo don't do early access. They do not do game preview. They don't do half-finished games. What is interesting about this is that these games, so this one, Dreamlight Valley, Overwatch 2, they're technically complete games, right? Overwatch 2 is still technically a beta release. They've not gone to a 1.0 release yet, but they're having seasons, right? And you don't have seasons on a game that's not, functionally or developmentally completed. So what this is these guys are able to get around the lot check. So lot check is the process that the console manufacturers require games to go through in order to be released on the platform. It's basically just a bunch of checks that Nintendo or Xbox or PlayStation will do to make sure that the game that's being released on that hardware will work, right? That it's not going to be full of bugs, or if they say this is a PG-13 game, that the content's not super R-rated and all that sort of stuff, right? Probably not so much the latter with the console makers, but they want to make sure that the game that's being released on their platform works the way it's supposed to. So the lot check is like the final thing, right? So whenever there's an update for a game, it has to go through lot check, right? So when there's new expansions, new content, new seasons, they all go through lot check just to make sure that what is being displayed to the gamer at the end of the day does work, right? That's why sometimes you'll find those weird bugs that slip through. So what's happening with this one is they've gone out of their way to say, yes, this is an early access release. Early access releases, or beta releases like Overwatch 2, don't have to submit lot check updates for every update they do, right? Because it's not a full release game, and people going into these games are aware that the game is not finished, so there will be things that people miss on them. It's honestly a pretty scummy move for these developers to do so. Not the developer, not the folks making the game, but the people in the business making the decision. If your game isn't ready to be, revealed to the world yet, that's fine, right? Sometimes games take longer to develop, not an issue there. But if you're releasing your game in this manner just to avoid having to prove to the console makers that you're not making dodgy stuff, maybe you need to avoid that. Maybe you should rethink your strategy. I played this last year when they had a closed beta. It's fine. It's unfortunately a mobile-focused game, and by that I don't mean it's made for mobile. I mean that it has a lot of mobile elements in it, and by that I mean it has the whole you don't just unlock a card, you unlock a piece of a card, a piece of the outfit, and until you collect all the pieces which are randomly rewarded, you can't access it. So this one will launch in 3 flavors, and there's the basic edition, the digital deluxe, and the founders edition. The basic is $47.95. The founders edition is $109.95 here. But just as a FYI for people, this game is going to be free to play once it's officially released. So if you don't want to spend $48 on this game, day one for a game that is technically not finished, that's fine. Just wait till it's done, and then you'll be able to play it for free once it releases. Disney Dreamlight Valley has the same thing. That is technically going to be a free-to-play game once that finishes, but they're using this early access moniker to get around some checks during the development process. So, into some good news though. This year celebrates the 5th anniversary of Far Cry 5, and Ubisoft have celebrated that by releasing an update to make it work on the current gen consoles. So the game, as I said, is 5 years old this year, and what they've done is they've added in the 60 FPS mode to the game for Xbox Series X and S and PlayStation 5. This is extremely similar to what Ubisoft did a while ago for Assassin's Creed Origins. They gave that a boost, basically making a native version for those consoles. So yesterday, for example, Far Cry 5 worked on Xbox Series X. It just ran in a backwards compatibility mode, essentially. Today, with the new update that's available, it'll download, it'll run full 4K at 60 FPS. The one thing to note too is that, so Xbox Series X and S, all the platforms are 60 frames a second. Xbox Series X has a resolution of 3840 by 2160, which is 4K. Xbox Series S runs at 1928 by 1080, so it's just a standard HD signal. And PS5 runs at 2880 by 1620. So it's kind of like 3K. It's not really, a full 4K. It's not a 4K resolution image. There's no word on if you can, say, lock it at 30 frames and then have it run at 4K on PlayStation 5. Xbox Series S will not do that because the game doesn't have the console doesn't have 4K support. The mode itself is across for all the games, all the content of the game. So it's the main game and all the expansions and extra content they've released. So you'll be able to enjoy the full experience at 60 FPS if you have the hardware to do so. Moving on from there, we did get a release date delay, and it's kind of a weird one. So System Shock, the remake, was announced earlier in the year to be releasing sometime in March. They never gave a specific date, and as we entered March, we still hadn't heard anything. Many people just assumed it'd be, the last couple of days of the month. They announced during the week that is not the case. The game will not release in March at all, but instead has been dated to release in May. May 30th is the date. Specifically, the words that they've provided just say, "We had hoped to bring the game to market by the end of March, but that turned out to be just beyond our reach. We are, after all, merely human, unlike Shodan." That's essentially it, right? They just needed more time, which is fine. I have no issues with that. This is about the third delay this game's had, so I'm starting to wonder, I'm not saying it's going to be like Cyberpunk, but it's one of those things where, if a game gets a delay, you're like, okay, cool, fine, whatever. Right, if a game says, hey, we're targeting this release window, and they don't meet it, they say, no, it's going to be another thing, okay, that's fine. You get one of those. But if you've had multiple delays, or you say, like Skull and Bones, we've got 6 different release windows and we didn't hit any of them, that also makes me question, the quality of the game. Now, don't get me wrong, a lot of stuff can happen in 3 months, 2.5 months, and this is a digital-only release for PC at the moment, so because of that, they could technically work on the game up until, May 28, and then, push it out to the stores, and, whatever the build of that build they've finished goes to players, it could be great. It just, as I said, it worries me that, this game's had so many delays, and even when they were confident it was going to hit March, halfway through the month they announced that it's been delayed yet again. So that was just a weird thing for them to sort of, not announce the delay, but to sort of wait, halfway through the release month until they did that. Moving on to some good news, we've got a couple of subscription update stories, specifically around PlayStation Plus and Nintendo Switch Online. We're going to stick with PlayStation Plus though and talk about their new catalog update. So generally speaking, in the middle of the month is when the PlayStation Plus Extra and Premium tiers get updated for PlayStation Plus. In Australia, we don't have the PlayStation 3 streaming games. I keep getting the names mixed up. In the US, it is Extra and Premium. Here it is Extra and Deluxe. So the game catalog is available in both. It is the older games, the PS1, the PSP, and the PS2 games that are in the Deluxe tier. But in terms of the PlayStation catalog, joining it this month available now is the Uncharted Legacy of Thieves collection, which adds Uncharted A Thief's End and Uncharted The Lost Legacy there. Tichia. Can we get Tichia? It's not, it's Chia. The T is essentially silent. That is available now. That is a day one release into the catalogue. This marks, I think, the third game that's done that. Stray was one of them last year. I think it was the first one. So that's there now. Rainbow Six Extraction is now in the catalogue. It is a cross-play game with Xbox and PC. And as far as more, it's still available in terms of inside of Game Pass on Xbox. So there should be some more players to play with. I say this with Rainbow Six Siege, and this is even worse. Rainbow Six Siege is not a Rainbow Six game. Rainbow Six Extraction shouldn't even be a Tom Clancy game. It is generic as buggery, and it is not fun. Ghostwire Tokyo, which released essentially a year ago to the day, not technically, but close to, that is now available in the catalogue. So if you have not given this game a chance yet, this will be your turn to do so. Life is Strange 2 True Colors and Life is Strange 2 are also now available. Immortals Phoenix Rising is there as well. They released a couple of years ago. This is essentially Ubisoft's, Greek Breath of the Wild. It's a very, very fun game. Dragon Ball Z Kakarot is now available in the catalogue, as is Street Fighter, for those who want a bit of a brawl. Untitled Goose Game is now there. This is obviously an Australian-made title. The developer for this, they've gone pretty quiet since this game released on all the platforms, but, that's still fun to play. Final Fantasy Type 0 HD, which was the HD version of a PSP game. Rage 2 is, honestly, it's just a dumb shooter, and by that I mean it's like Fast and Furious. You don't need to worry about the quality of the game. If you're going in just to shoot things, this will deliver that in spades. If you're going in expecting, a 1,000-page novel about the complexities of the human psyche, you're going to be severely let down. I call Fast and Furious the popcorn movie. This is the popcorn game, right? You go in, you turn your brain off, you just enjoy it. That's it. That's all you need to worry about. Neo, The World Ends With You is now available, making, for like the 90th Square Enix game to be added to it. And Haven is the final one that was added to it. Haven released first on PlayStation last year. It eventually came to Switch as well. In the premium, which is the highest tier, Ridge Racer Type 4 is available for PS1. Ape Academy 2 is on PSP, and Siphon Filter Dark Mirror is also on PSP. So it's interesting that they've added these sort of games in for the classic titles. The last month's update, the February one, didn't really have a lot of older games. I think it was like 2 or 3 PS1 games only. So the fact they're adding the PSP games is probably a nice thing. But they're very, very cautious on adding content from the older platforms to the service. Sony were kind enough to provide me a couple of months of the full, premium tier to try it out last year. And I honestly just never made use of it because I, never have time to sit down and play old games. But when I was looking through the lineup for the first couple of months, it was just fairly anemic. Not the game catalog. That's growing and growing and growing. But the classic stuff, right? They're not pushing that as much as they are, and that's it's a big thing. If you want, these games, you've got to pay, I think it's like $135 a year for it. So it's not exactly a cheap thing. So the fact that they're not really adding a lot to this, selection is kind of weird. And I get it, most people are probably paying, for the game catalog and nothing further. But it's just a little weird they're not really pushing this one as much as they should be. The other thing too, of course, is that unlike Xbox, who say, hey, we're adding these 10 games and we're taking away these 10 games, PlayStation don't announce the games that are coming away as part of the news. So they will announce the new games coming, and for both the catalog and the classics, but they don't announce what games are going away. So just be aware of that. Games do get removed from the PlayStation catalog. They just do not say what they are. There's also only a few months left until the PlayStation 5 PlayStation Plus catalog is removed. So if you haven't obtained all the games in that collection yet, if you have a PlayStation 5, that is something you need to do before that goes away. Moving away from PlayStation subscriptions, we're going to talk Nintendo subscriptions, and specifically for their Nintendo Switch Online service. So much like PlayStation, Nintendo have tiers. So PlayStation, they have Essentials, Extra, and Deluxe. For Nintendo, they have Nintendo Switch Online and Nintendo Switch Online Plus Expansion Pack. Nintendo Switch Online got a boost a couple of months ago, back in February, when they added Game Boy titles to it. And then out of nowhere, as they always do for these things, they announced 4 titles for the 3 platforms in the basic tier. The titles are Burger Time Deluxe and Kirby's Dream Land 2 for Game Boy, Side Pocket for the Super Nintendo, and Xevious for NES. What is interesting is Kirby's Dream Land 2 we knew was coming. They announced this as part of their future lineup during the Direct, when they said, hey, and these are some of the titles you can look forward to. They said this was coming. People were excited for it. Burger Time Deluxe, however, was not mentioned there. This was a surprise addition to the lineup, if you will. which also means that, you know, there's the potential for them to do this in the future. They do, of course, never tell anyone about NES or Super Nintendo games anymore, so they kind of just drop. So, you know, you can't go reading anything into the fact they added Burger Time Deluxe in, but it's nice to see it there. As I said, Xevious is there, and then Side Pocket is a billiards game. So, in terms of the games, you know, it's nice that we finally started getting some more content into this basic tier. I believe we're close to 100 titles in the NES library, with the addition of Xevious. There are 94, so yeah, so we're very close to 100 there. Obviously there are some games that are in Japan only, some games are in Australia only, but that's you know, nice to have it there. Super Nintendo, we're just over 70 now with Side Pocket. What is interesting is, you know, they were doing, you know, 2-3 games at a time. This is the only time we've had a single game drop, which is a little weird, but, you know, so be it, I suppose. And at the moment, with the games for Game Boy, we're now up to a dozen there. We know that Kirby's Tilt and Tumble is coming. We know that the 2 Oracle games are coming. We know the Pokemon trading card game is coming. When they're coming, who knows? A lot of people thought maybe Pokemon would release on Pokemon Day at the end of February, or maybe the Pokemon Stadiums for the Nintendo 64 app, but that was not to be the case. Either way, it's nice to see that they are still adding content to that tier. You know, I just sort of wish they'd, you know, maybe announce these things a little ahead of time, right? Just so, you know, I wasn't being caught off guard all the time. Speaking of updates to, you know, games and services, Need for Speed Unbound is getting more content. So this is a little weird. I honestly have to think this is the first time we've ever seen a big content drop come for a Need for Speed game. Now, I did mention at the start of the year, did a series of what our publisher working on, and for EA in the Criterion section, you know, they had literally just shipped Need for Speed Unbound at the start of December last year, and then it was 3rd of January, I think it was something like that, very early in the year. They tweeted out that they're just getting started. Now, of course, that could just mean, hey, they've got more Need for Speed games in development, or it could mean, you know, an expansion, or could mean content. Turns out it means content. So the big thing with this update is it'll add the ability to play online with friends in cop chases. So what it means is that you can actually you drive around together, and then, you know, when you trigger a chase, if you're the one that triggers it, your mates can, you know, hang back and try and keep the cops off you to build up your heat meter to get your score and multiplier going, to earn some big rewards. They can also drop out of the thing, so if you get up to, say, like a level 3 heat or level 4, they can drop out just to leave you to deal with the chaos of all the cops after you, right? So that's one of the things that's being added to it. Another is that they're adding, so specifically, 40 new daily challenges and 15 new regular challenges are being added to the game in the update. They're also doing 30 hot lap related activities, 4 new endurance events, 2 new Rumble playlists, 2 new race playlists, and a refresh of the existing playlists. So it's not just they're adding, you know, online cop chases, they're adding a lot more content. There's 2 cars that have been revealed. There's a third they're being a bit coy on. One car is the Lotus Emira Balmain Edition, which is the green and yellow one here. All very shiny looking. The other one is the Nissan Fairlady Z72? ZG71. And this one, however, is only available to EA Play members. So if you have an EA Play subscription, either on PC, PlayStation, or Xbox, the EA Play is included with Xbox Game Pass, so technically it should still work there. You'll get access to this custom car as well. Obviously, they're going to add new stickers, new effects for driving, new emotes and poses and all that sort of stuff. They did also confirm there would be UI updates and game changes. It's like gameplay improvements. No word on what they are yet. They've said, you know, they'll release that information closer to when the update actually drops. But it's nice to see they are doing some things. I didn't review the game last year. That was done by one of the other guys on the team. I did, however, EA were very kind enough to provide me another code so I could play it during sort of the holiday break. And I gave up after about 3 hours. because the controls, not the controls, but the way the car handles in this game was honestly just shit. I did not like it at all. And this is coming from Criterion, who spent years, with Burnout, perfecting the arcade racer. They did Burnout Paradise, then they moved on to Need for Speed Most Wanted, Need for Speed Hot Pursuit, right? They made some fantastic games, and then they essentially got made into a support studio for DICE, making content for Star Wars games. While, Need for Speed got shoved off to another studio. That studio is now making support content for Battlefield games, and Criterion is doing Need for Speed. So there's a whole lot of shuffling around. But yeah, I just didn't like it. Like, I was, you'd try and drive straight down a road, and if you went a little off center, the car would autocorrect. You couldn't just drift around corners, by things. It's like, this is not supposed to be a Forza or a Gran Turismo. It's supposed to be an arcade game, and it was trying a little too hard, and it's handling for me to be an arcade game, so it just wasn't fun. So I'm hoping that some of these gameplay changes or improvements do update those sort of mechanics. I mentioned this earlier, but Ghostwire Tokyo is obviously it's now available in the PlayStation Plus catalog, but during the week Xbox and Bethesda revealed that the game is actually coming to Xbox. This is obviously not going to be a surprise to anyone who, follows anything gaming related, because, Xbox do own Bethesda. Sorry, let me rephrase that. Microsoft own Bethesda. I need to clarify this point. People keep saying Xbox, but it's not. Xbox do not own Bethesda. Technically, Microsoft owns ZeniMax, and ZeniMax own Bethesda. But yeah, so Microsoft owns the, ZeniMax and Bethesda, and Microsoft have a division called Xbox, and in that division they oversee what Bethesda do, right? So just to be clear on that. Ghostwire Tokyo and Deathloop were released on PlayStation 5 as console exclusives for 12 months. These are the deals that Bethesda signed with PlayStation before the acquisition deal was announced by Xbox and obviously approved. Xbox, contractually they didn't have to keep the agreements. They could have broken them and paid a fee and said no, you don't get exclusives, but they honored the contracts. The 12-month exclusivity is now up for Ghostwire Tokyo, and is now coming to Xbox Series X and S. The big thing obviously is it is coming. It'll be available on the 18th of April, the same day as Speedstorm. So you can either race around as Mickey Mouse in tracks, or you can jump on your Xbox and explore a deserted Tokyo. The big thing, obviously, with this, though, is it is coming to Xbox Series X and S, of course. It will also be available on, PC through the Windows Store. Currently, it's available elsewhere on PC. But the big thing is the Spider's Thread update. So the Spider's Thread update is adding in new content. So it's not just going to be, what's the best way to describe it? It's not just going to be like a new boss fight or anything like that. I do actually have... Oh, where are we? So specifically, the Spider's Thread game mode tasks players to navigate a 30-stage gauntlet selected from over 120 handcrafted levels with one simple goal: get to the end. As players clear challenges and complete stages, they'll unlock more skills and earn in-game currency to spend on upgrades. So it's kind of like a roguelike mode for it. The Spider's Thread update also adds new locations to visit, including a middle school, which, if you know much about, Japan, a lot of their sort of ghost stories these days are connected to schools. So there'll be that one. The new location also adds new missions and more mysteries to uncover. The main game's story will also feature extended cutscenes, so it'll add more information to what's going on story-wise. There are also new visitors in the update, so there's the Invisible Silent Gaze or the Elusive Retribution. So there's new skills called Charge Rush and and what they call it the Devastating Counterattack being added to the game as part of this update. So Xbox players will get that on the 18th of April as part of the release. The update arrives on PC and PlayStation 5 as well. So this isn't content exclusively for just the Xbox players. This is a content update going to all players. So if you are interested in it, it is there for you. Moving on, we also have a release date for Tron Identity, which is the visual novel-esque puzzle game coming from Bithell Games. And that is coming out this April, specifically April 11th. So the week before Disney Speedstorm, Disney's Tron will also have a game release. The big thing with this, obviously, is that the game isn't a game, it's not a shooter, it's not a platformer, it's not an action adventure. It is a visual novel. So if I put the trailer on here, you'll get to see it. So because this is a visual novel, a lot of it is just, reading information on screen, making choices. Depending on the choices, the story will go in different directions. It is launching on Switch and PC on the 11th. It will come to PlayStation and Xbox later in the year, but there is no set date for it yet. I hadn't watched this trailer yet, so I didn't see that they had the green, programs there. So, traditionally in Tron, the blue program, which was Tron in the first movie, Sam Flynn in Tron Legacy, they are the good programs, if you will. The orange programs are traditionally the corrupted programs. They're the ones that are sort of a bit evil. In the expanded universe of Tron, because that exists, there is what's the way to describe it? The green is like the military-esque programs, right? The more severe programs. So they follow like very rigid rules. This is what you have to do. This is how it happens, right? So as I said, yeah, it is definitely going to be, a little different to what you might be expecting for a Tron game. The last Tron game didn't really launch. It launched in sort of an early access stage, and then it sort of just dropped off the grid, so to speak. Pun for that was not intended, but I will honor it. So that was an endless runner. It was called Tron Runner R/NER from something like that. And then the last Tron game before that was back on Xbox 360 days. So it's been a while since we had a Tron game, and the fact that this one is a puzzle-based game rather than a visual novel / puzzle game rather than anything else is quite interesting to me. Obviously, again, depending on the choices that you make, depending on the how quick you are to respond to things, you may have a different outcome, which obviously just inspires you to maybe play the game a second time. Moving out of the world of video games, we're going to jump into the world of Lego, specifically because Lego Indiana Jones is back. However, this is not for a third Indiana Jones video game. This is for actual physical Lego. So if you recall, way back in the late 2000s, the late 20s, it's like 2008 was when Lego Indiana Jones released. And then it was like a year or 18 months later that the sequel released. So we got these, Lego Indiana Jones video games. And a lot of people at the time were like, cool, this means obviously they've designed this stuff, we can have, real Lego sets now. Never happened. So here we are some 15 years later, and we're finally getting 3 sets. The biggest set is the Golden Idol escape scene that you can see here that opens up Raiders of the... I was going to merge the two titles together. This is Raiders of the Lost Ark. So this is the one where Indy, swaps over the Golden Idol for the bag of sand, thinks he's been successful, and then has to run away because a boulder drops down and chases him out. It's also when he dives out and then he gets surrounded and the idol gets taken. It's very, very funny because this little character here next to Indiana Jones is his guide, and he double crosses him and ends up dead, and that's Alfred Molina. It was one of his very early film roles. Comic fans will know him as playing Doc Ock in Spider-Man 2 from Sam Raimi, and more recently in Spider-Man No Way Home. So this one is available on April 1st. They're all available on April 1st, but this one is $239.99, so $240. It is a 1,500 piece set, so it's going to be quite intricate, which, you can see here with all the different, tile shapes and all that sort of stuff, it's going to be extremely intricate. So just something to be aware of. Moving down in terms of price points, we're moving on to the Raiders of the Lost Ark Temple set. I say Temple, they say Tomb. But when Indy and Marion go down to try and they find where the thing was pointing, they then hide in this area before they get trapped inside, and Indy has to knock over the giant statue to bust the hole out before they because of all the snakes. That's what this is here. So as you can see, there's rotating pieces. You can see back on this one here. This statue on the side here tips back, and the wall breaks away. So that one there is $59.99, so $60, and it's a 600-piece set. The smallest of the sets is $50. It's 387 pieces, and that's the one that includes Henry Jones Sr. and Henry Jones Jr., also known as Indiana, along with Nazi minifig. They're not calling him a Nazi in this, they're just calling him a fighter pilot. Obviously, you can see there are no swastikas on the plane. They've essentially, stripped away anything that says this is the Nazis. Just because that's a Disney decision. They don't want to sort of promote that in any way, shape, or form, so they take it away. This is obviously the only set where you can get Henry Jones Sr., played by the late Sean Connery. It's a playset piece. There's no giant set to build. There's no interactive playset. It's just a car and a plane and figures. So it's very cool. It's a very small photo. But yeah, that is coming on April 1st for $50. I'm very happy to see them. Earlier in the week, they also officially announced the Jurassic Park Lego. Those Lego sets, however, they... so last week they announced the Bowser Castle, the dry Bowser Castle set, and then they announced the Jurassic Park sets, and then they announced the Indiana Jones set. So they've done some big stuff. What I don't like about the Jurassic Park stuff, right? So Jurassic Park is I have two favorite movies: Jurassic Park and Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And I do not like the Lego sets for Jurassic Park because the dinosaurs look like they're the Duplo dinosaurs. They're not the Duplo dinosaurs. The Duplo ones are slightly worse, but these are not great. So yeah, that one has 5 sets in there, and the prices range from $60. From $39.99. I think is the cheapest one. For the Dilophosaurus, that's the spitter, if you're not aware, and the big one is the T-Rex, in the visitor center that sort of ends the original movie. That's $250, I think, from memory. So yeah, they're just not that interesting in terms of visual design. So that's sort of where I am with those. Just before we move on to the hands-on for Dead Island 2, I just want to point out that tomorrow morning at 4 a.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Savings Time, so 4 a.m. Sydney time, the Media Indie Exchange Spring Showcase will be taking place. This is an indie-focused event that will have developers that may, it may be a publisher that publishes like 3 or 4 indie games a year for other studios. It may be just 2 guys in a room. Could be 2 girls in a room, could be whatever. That's just there. This is a spotlight event for them. Then next Friday at 9 a.m. Will be the Future Games Spring Showcase. So that'll be, there's 45 games have actually upped the title count now. There was 40 when they announced it, there's now 45, and that'll be going through all that. Moving on, I do want to talk about some Dead Island 2. So, over the past couple of weeks, Deep Silver were kind enough to provide me access to the game on my Xbox, and I got to play a little under 5 hours it took me to get through the content. So, if you've seen the recent expanded gameplay video that they put out, it's about 14 minutes long. That showcases sort of one of the areas that was available to me. I got to go beyond that area and then onto a whole nother part of town. So when I did the preview, I didn't do it just a whole, this is what I did, and then I sort of decided to do it a little differently. So I put it in a question format. question, is this connected to the original Dead Island? Obviously, you know, different developers. It's been, you know, a decade and change since that first game released and the standalone expansion. You know, Dead Island 2 was technically announced. I put it up here. 9 years ago was when Dead Island 2 was announced. So it's very nearly becoming vaporware. You know, so is this game connected to it? Well, it is. And in terms of timeline, the Dead Island 2 takes place about 4 months after Dead Island. Because they don't date, you know, they don't say, oh, on this date. They're not, you know, nailing specifics down, but there's a character that you meet fairly early on in this game that goes through and explains, you know, they were on the island, they were a part of that outbreak, and they survived it, and now they're here trying to help other people survive this one. So they do a little explanation. They may do more further on in the game. I don't know about that because obviously I wasn't allowed to go past a set point, but that's something to be aware of. Interestingly, you know, the second thing is, how does movement feel? The first Dead Island was a big thing about, it wasn't full parkour, but they did a lot more with, you know, dodging and climbing and all that sort of stuff. Techland, who created the series, they created, you know, they did the first game and the standalone expansion, and then rather than work on Dead Island 2, they created a new sort of zombie parkour game called Dying Light. And, you know, they released Dying Light 2 last year. So, they, you know, a lot of the first game was all about movement. The second game is still very much the same. So, you know, if there's a single zombie on screen, you can run up to them and take them down without too much hassle. 2 or 3 zombies, and you really have to pay attention to how you're moving, right? You can strafe around them if you want and all that sort of stuff. But it's more a matter of, you know, you may have to make sure you don't let any come from the sides, right? So you're constantly dodging, stepping back, stepping to the sides, all that sort of stuff. If you have the skills, you can, you know, sprint, jump, and then like drop kick them to try and get them away from you, all that sort of stuff. So movement is very, very interesting because if you stay still and there's a bunch of zombies coming at you, a lot of them tend to like lunge at the last second. Even just the shamblers, they'll lunge at you. So if you're not paying attention, you know, the distance you think is going to keep you safe for an extra second, you can lose it like that and you're in trouble. Do the weapons still break down? Yes, they do, and I don't know why. I can understand if they, you know, just weren't doing as much damage, but no, they break. And I get it for, you know, a plank of burnt wood, you know, that is definitely not going to last. But the whole thing, like, one of the very first weapons that the game introduced to me was a samurai sword. It was in a glass case, and basically I had the choice. I could break open the case and get the sword out, but it was alarmed, and if, you know, the alarm went off, it had loaded zombies, or I could ignore it, keep zombies away from me, and be a little bit safer. And I said, no, it's a samurai sword. You know, it's a melee-focused game. I want a sword. So I busted it open, got the sword, took on, you know, half a dozen zombies that came into the room for the noise. And it was great. The problem is the sword broke. And when I say broke, I don't mean like, you know, it just wasn't sharp anymore. It literally broke. It snapped in half. And the durability stuff makes no sense to me. It's the same thing in Breath of the Wild. The durability there made no sense either. You know, again, I get it for like, you know, a stick, right? It's a stick. It's gonna break, right? A lead pipe, no, they're designed, you know, to take exceeding amounts of pressure and not give, right? But games decide, you know, randomly, oh, you've hit 100 things with this lead pipe. Oh, it's shattered into, oh well. So the same thing happens here, right? The sword, it broke. There wasn't much I could do about it. But there was. You can repair weapons. So at the workbenches, as you know, I think I called it in one of the pictures above, I called it kleptomania of the game. Because as you're running around, you'll find scrap bits of metal, glue, tape, you know, a whole bunch of assorted random junk. And if you bring it back with you, kleptomania of the game. If you bring it back with you, you can take it all into the workbench and repair these weapons. So if you have a really cool melee weapon that you love, you can, you know, keep it with you and repair it when you get a chance to, you know, get it back again. There are obviously weapon upgrades, so you can, you know, add electrical effects to it, like poison effects, all those sorts of stuff. to deal out more damage. If you have a weapon that has a special effect or it's almost going to break, you can actually throw them depending on your character and get extra damage for doing that. Guns do exist in the game. I didn't get a chance to try any out because they're not an everywhere item, whereas pipes and planks are. So I can't say much about the guns in this one. Why is it called Dead Island 2 and not set on an island? As I said here, honestly, I don't know. I think they just needed to keep the name for branding purposes. If they called it Dead LA, I don't think people would have, worried so much. I think if it was Dead, colon and then location, that would have been fine. We could have Dead London, Dead Tokyo, Dead Melbourne, Dead Los Angeles, right? That would have been fine, but they've decided to keep it as Dead Island 2, and it's not set on an island. The game still has that weird thing where it's set in one giant location, but there are sectioned off zones. The area you're in is a very large play area, but when you need to go to a different area, that you've got a load screen. The first game did the same thing. Obviously, that was a limitation of the engine back in the day. Since then, the engines are more powerful, but they've sort of kept that. So each area has its own dedicated little, bubble of play. So if there's special zombies in a different area, they don't just wander into your area, so to speak. The areas that I got to play through were Beverly Hills and Bel Air. Beverly Hills obviously is home of the mansions, the movie stars, and all that sort of stuff. Bel Air is just rich people, rock stars, stuff like that. So there's more zones that the game alludes to. I'm not going to talk about them here. For content of spoilers, conscientious of spoilers, but it is something to be aware of that does exist there in that context. I sort of mentioned this before, but what about the zombies? Are they a danger? Yes and no. So I'll scroll up a little bit so that screenshot's not sitting on the screen there. As I said, like if it's a single basic zombie like a shuffler, that's fine, right? Generally speaking, for those guys, you can also just run around them. You don't have to engage them, right? If you're in a hurry or you don't care. But there are runner zombies, and the runners will literally sprint towards you. They may stop halfway there, screech at you, and then run again, right? They're still easy enough because at the last second they try to lunge and they generally trip. And you can start wailing on them while they're on the ground. They're fine. When you start getting into, instead of just one or two zombies, when you start getting, 5, 6, 7 zombies in a location, and if you draw the attention of one zombie, they'll make noise and they'll draw the rest in. But then there are also, the larger zombies, right? When I say large, I don't mean like fat zombies. I mean like large, like, 6.5 feet tall, build of muscle, bodybuilder types. Where I first saw them, they're all sort of associated with the military, so they're all dressed in like, military fatigues. That's all well and good. They, they'll happily pummel you to the ground first, right, before they do anything else. Then there are also police zombies in riot gear. You have to break away, the armor that protects them first before you can worry about, dealing any damage. One of the special zombies, apart from, the ones that have like electricity coursing through them, I think they call it a swarm zombie. I just call it the hive zombie, because it literally has like, bees or, insects, whatever, growing inside of its chest. And if you alert it, it will just send out a wave. It can control them for some reason. It sends out a wave of zombies after you. So something to be aware of there is, there are different zombies. So moving out of Beverly Hills to Bel Air, I had to get, there was a security gate, and it required me to have a security card to unlock it. One of the guys that had the card was one of the big hulking guys, and that's not a problem, right? The problem, however, was there was, half a dozen regular zombies, couple of armored zombies, and a swarm zombie around, right? There are a bunch of them. And again, you have to keep moving. You can't stand still, and especially because you don't have a gun, right? If you had a gun, you could try maybe headshotting them from a distance to clear out some. But this is early days, so you don't have a lot of stamina, you don't have a lot of weapons. So you have to keep moving in order to ensure that you're doing everything you can to stay safe. So, you know, while you're trying to focus on taking down the hulking guy, you've got to be aware that the swarm zombie that's launched 2 sets of, you know, bees at you, you know, he's still shuffling toward you and the bees are chasing you down. So, you know, and then of course you've got to be worried about the elemental stuff and all that. So there's a lot happening. So zombies 1 at a time, maybe 2 at a time aren't that big of a deal, but you know, 3, 4, 5 at a time, that's when you just have to start worrying. All right, what about the human characters? You know, the ones that aren't dead. So there's a bunch. So Bob is one of the guys that you meet early on. He's, you know, the survivor from the first game. There's a whole bunch of other characters. I won't get into their names here. One of them, you know, he's like a gardener for the rich, and he's, you know, hey, I can help you out. You know, you go out and do these things. I will, you know, supply you with things here, you know, that if I can. Basically, he's the shop. Because, you know, he just, even though he doesn't go anywhere, he just happens to have all access to all these, you know, weapons that you can buy from him. So that's interesting. The way that the game works in terms of, you know, you deciding what character you wish to be, is that as they're all escaping, the camera will sit on them and say, you know, so the 6 characters at launch, there's going to be more coming post-launch, but the 6 at launch, that is Danny, Jacob, Ryan, Amy, Bruno, and Carla. I picked Amy. 2 of the characters are selfish pricks. One stole a ticket from somebody else who was going to, you know, he was literally behind him in line, didn't have his own ticket, so he stole the one from the person in front of him, then made him get out of line by causing a distraction, used his ticket to get in, right? Another one just snuck on board because they thought they had the right to. So, you know, 2 of them, selfish pricks, don't care for them at all. But the reason why you need to sort of pay attention to it is you can't change the character once you've selected them. And each character has special skills that apply, you know, they're exclusive to them. So Amy, for example, she could, you know, if, you know, the weapon was going to break and you threw your weapon at a zombie and you managed to hit them, it would restore her stamina, right? Which is what you need with power moves, the sprinting and the jump kicks, all that sort of stuff. Bruno had one where, you know, if his health was low, he would be able to hit, his hits would inflict more critical damage. So there's a lot of stuff like that with them. As you play through the game and you do more things and you kill more zombies, lots of stuff, you start unlocking additional cards. And the cards you can swap out at any time. So some cards may give you more melee damage, some may make you jump higher, some may make you run faster. So there's a range of those things. Those are all in addition to the character-specific ones. So Amy's ability to recover stamina, which is very important for her because she's a runner. So, you know, if she has no stamina, she can't run. So her big thing is mobility. So her big buff is that, you know, if you hit hit a zombie with a thrown weapon, you get more, you know, you get a recharge of stamina, which can make you move better. So depending on the character you choose, those things are going to be different. And again, depending on the card you apply to the character, the way that you play things is going to be very different. The final question then, you know, is the game fun? Yes, I had fun with it. I kind of wish I could play more of it now, just because I was enjoying it so much. It is a dated formula. Like, it hasn't, at least from what I've played of it, it hasn't deviated too much from what it was doing, you know, a decade ago. But so the old adage, you know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, sort of applies here. I'm not saying it's a perfect game. This, you know, again, it was an in development build, so you know, there was a lot of optimization still to be done. You know, pop-ups, glitches, and all that still existed. But again, it's an in-dev build, so these things are 100% expected to occur. Again, like, some of the characters didn't appeal to me at all. But, you know, I thought Amy was the best of them. You know, her confidence sometimes borders arrogance, but that confidence and arrogance is based on the fact that, you know, her skill is that she's a runner, right? She's a sprinter, and she knows she's good, right? And her goal for surviving this zombie apocalypse is because she wants to join, you know, she needs to get out of town to get some trials, you know, for the running, so she can get into the Paralympics. Amy's missing, you know, her right leg. knee down. So they do. Each of the characters has their own thing, but that's her thing, is she wants to get out of town for that reason. So because she spent her life running and training and getting better for all this stuff, she's got that confidence. As I said, sometimes it borders into arrogance, but sometimes the arrogance fades away to sarcasm when the mission to say, hey, go do this happens, and none of the other people in the house want to go outside. It's up to the player character to do so. So some of the characters will determine if you have fun or not. If after you've been playing it as Danny for 6 hours and you're like, I don't really like her, she's not really, I'm not really jiving with her, you got to restart the game. You can't just swap characters willy-nilly though, which I can understand it, because a lot of it, some of the stuff's based on your character and your play style, but I kind of wish they'd give you an option to maybe a few hours in, hey, are you good with this character, or do you want to change it? Right, that's not what happens, at least not in the build that I played, but we'll see what happens if that's something they put into the full game, maybe even as post-launch stuff. Right, with all that said and done, we're going to move on to the games coming out over the next 7 days. So it's an interesting week. There's some sort of big name things, but not really big games. There is one big game, but we'll get to that. So on Tuesday, the 21st, Remnant from the Ashes will come to Switch. That game launched a number of years ago for PC, PlayStation, and Xbox. It is, a multiplayer co-op survival shooter, essentially. There's more to it than that, but that's like the quick summary. Chia, which I said earlier, already is in PlayStation Plus. It's not. It's coming on Tuesday. So that's there. On the 22nd, which is next Wednesday, Have a Nice Death will come to PC and Switch. That is a Hollow Knight-esque type game. It's the quickest way I can describe that one. On the 23rd, Omen of Sorrow will arrive for PC, Switch, and PS5. That's a fighting game. Rakuen, I don't know how you pronounce that. It's an adventure game coming to Switch on the same day. And then finally, Storyteller will arrive for PC and Switch on the 23rd as well. That is a puzzle adventure game developed by one person, and it's being published by Annapurna Interactive. And Annapurna are sort of one of those sort of unique indie publishers. One of the big games they did last year was Stray. The 24th will see the release of Atelier Ryza 3, Alchemist of the End, and The Secret Key. Why they need to make these names so complicated, I will never understand, but that's launching on Friday next week. And then also a little game that some people may have heard of, Resident Evil 4 Remake, will be arriving on that day as well. We have the review for that in progress. We're playing through it now. We'll have that up before the embargo. The week after that, Last of Us Part 1 comes to PC, MLB The Show 23 hits all platforms, and Dredge coming from Team 17. So there's a lot sort of happening the week after as well. But next week's kind of quiet. There's a couple of indie games, and then obviously, Atelier Ryza 3 and Resident Evil 4, depending on how you want to think of those in terms of size. That is our show. For all the details about these stories that were in the show and the ones that didn't make it in, be sure to visit Maxi-Geek.au and follow us on your favorite social media platforms to stay up to date with everything we do. Thank you for watching, and until we see you online next time, happy gaming.